Greetings, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you are in the world. Welcome to another live lecture brought to you by the U.S. Spiritist Federation. We are delighted to go over a very interesting topic, to bring a very interesting topic to all of us today, which is detachment and spiritual well-being. We have here our guest, our speaker, uh, is Danielle Martins. How are you doing, Danielle?
I'm great. Thank you, Glaucio. Good morning, everybody. Good afternoon, everybody. As you said, depending on where you are in the world, it's really a pleasure to be here once again. So it's been a year since we had the pleasure to be together and to speak, and I'm really honored to be here today. And as you said, so it's a topic. It's a talk that is really interesting. Seems rather simple when we are saying, but sometimes when you have to put it in your real daily life, sometimes could be a bit tricky, but very interesting and challenging.
I'm pretty sure you're going to bring us some very interesting points and some very practical points for all of us.
Hope.
At this time, let's say the initial prayer. I'll say the initial prayer, and then and then we can get started. Okay?
Okay, let's go.
Thank you, Lord, for the opportunity that we have to be here, to open our minds and to open our hearts. Detachment is such an easy word. All of us understands what it is. All of us understands the meaning of the noun. However, it's so hard for us to put it in practice in our daily lives. Give us strength so that we can try to better ourselves and understand the true value of things, and open up our eyes so we can have a higher perspective in anything in our lives. Bless us wherever we are, maybe in our homes, in our offices, in our centers, or even in the streets as we listen to this lecture, and inspire our lecturer for today so he may bring to all of us the messages that we need for our lives. So be it.
So be it. Thank you, Glossio.
Yeah. Hey, Daniel, let's talk a little bit about you. I mean, before we begin, okay? So I
Sure.
understand
Let's
that
go.
you're a chemical engineer, and you
I
have two
am.
masters. Yeah, you have two master's degrees, right?
That's
One
true.
is in marketing, and the other one is in nanoscience and advanced materials.
That's true.
Uh,
That's true.
and you've been living in Belgium since 2009, and
That's true.
you've been a spiritist for your whole, since childhood. And that in the Spiritist movement in Belgium, you've been involved for 10 years. Excellent. And you're a member of the board of directors of the
That's
Spiritist
true.
Studies Camille Flammarion and Nicafla in Brussels. And also a speaker, has many other responsibilities. I'm pretty sure you're a very busy
True.
individual. And this is interesting. So yeah, so let's talk about about detachment and spiritual
Let's
well-being.
go. Let's go there, Glossio. So again, so a pleasure to be here. Hope you're gonna like today's talk. So yeah, we're going to speak about detachment and spiritual well-being. So, and in order to start, I would like to propose you a few questions, and actually some food for thought. And hopefully at the end of our talk, I will be able we will all have answers up questions I'd like to share with you. So first of all, so I believe that the real question is, what is real detachment? Would it be simply giving away everything we have and leave it at expense of someone else? Or would it be to let go of our beliefs, our relationships, our positions, status, and traditions, simply abandon everything that we stand for? And what does Spiritism say about wealth, about riches, about earthly possessions? Does it condemn them? Is there a consensus? Is there a Spiritist view about all these topics? And also, what about other philosophies like Buddhism, like Christianity, and most modernly the psychoanalysis? Where do they stand on detachment? Also, I think that this is a very important question that I believe that every religion in the world has already formulated and proposed to us. Are riches an obstacle to our evolution? Are they an instrument of perdition or salvation? And I think that this is really the trickiest the trickiest one is how can we balance the evolution of the spiritual man with the one of the material man, how we can reconcile both worlds, both evolutions. Where should we focus our efforts? And I think that, just as a starter, I believe that it would be nice to have a look on the concept of detachment. First of all, so let's jump into the more physical concept of detachment, which is the act of detaching or the condition of being detached. If we go for a more emotional dimension, we could say that detachment is lack of interest, of enthusiasm, and a lot of people confuse detachment with that, and we're going to understand a little bit more later on. Some people, when they refer to detachment, they refer to disinterest, indifference, or aloofness. But I believe that we are all interested in the two and in the other dimensions of detachment. First of all, psychological one, which is the freedom from self-interest, from bias, from prejudice, or partiality. And there is a philosophical or religious dimension of detachment, which is the attitude marked by abnegation and altruism. So you can see that there are both more physical and material definitions and more emotional, psychological, and philosophical ones. And to give you some colors about that, I'm going to bring a couple of stories that will help to illustrate these concepts. Let's start with one that is called Gandhi's Sandals, and I really like this one. It tells a story that once, while Gandhi was hopping on a train in India, he tripped on the step and dropped the sandal off his right foot. What happened next? At that very moment, the train started to move, and he simply couldn't retrieve it anymore. And in front of everyone, he calmly removed the sandal from his left foot and threw it out of the window. Everybody started staring at him, saying, "Oh my God, what did you do?" And then a British officer came to him and said, "Gandhi, why did you do that?" And then Gandhi, and here we can see we're speaking of a highly evolved spirit. He said, "Hey, a sandal alone is useless. It's useless for me. It's useless for anyone who finds the one that fell off the train. At least now the finder can have the complete pair of sandals." So Gandhi putting his his brothers before his own interest, as we know very well from this from his history. The other example comes from a Zen Buddhist tale, and it's called The Two Monks. And this one has more of the emotional and philosophical dimension of detachment. So it says that once a master and his disciple were on their way to the neighboring village when they came to a mighty river and saw on the bank of it a beautiful girl that was trying to cross it. And so the master didn't hesitate, and he offered to help her, and lifting her in his arms, he carried her to the bank. And then finished, and each one went his way. But then the disciple, he didn't took that very well. He was very upset, actually, as the master had always taught him that a monk should never ever approach a woman and never ever touch a woman. And he had all that in mind. And the disciple, he thought and rethought the matter. And finally, when he returned to the temple, he had enough courage to go there and talk to his master, and he could no longer contain himself and said to him, Master, uh, you teach me day after day never to touch a woman, and yet you took that pretty girl in your arms and crossed the river with her. What was that? And then the answer coming from the master, which is really, really thoughtful. Fool, replied the master, I left the girl on the other side of the river, but you are still carrying her. So that shows that the attachment of the disciple was so hard to his principles, to his philosophy, that he couldn't see the bigger picture. He couldn't see someone who was in need, someone who desperately need help to do something, but he was really so attached to his concepts that he was blocking his sight and he couldn't see through the situation. And that kind of attitude is also shown in the book called In the Realms of Mediumship, also depending on the translation, in the domain of mediumship, written by Francisco Candido Xavier and dictated by the spirit of Andrea Luis. There's this chapter 13 called Thought and Mediumship, and it's all about the end of mediumistic session, and the spiritual guide of that session, he comes and he leaves a message to the participants of that seance. And he said, let us watch our thoughts, purifying them in the incessant work of good, so that we cast from us the chains capable of attaching us to obscure processes of lower life. And then as he moves forward, and this is very beautiful as image, as metaphor, he says, it is from the living forge of ideas that both wings of angels and shackles of the damned come out. Through our thoughts, meaning where we put our minds, we enslave ourselves to trunks of infernal torture, sentencing ourselves at times of centuries of suffering, of pilgrimage on the paths of pain and death. And to shorten the torment that plagues conscience when we are behind atonement bars, it is essential to do what? To attend the mental renewal, the only means of restoring harmony. So he's drawing our attention to the fact that if we do not know the right place of putting our thoughts, our minds, and if we get too attached to different things, sometimes we lose perspective, and sometimes we later on create a lot of different actions that will have consequences, different consequences in our evolution. And if we go back in time, 2000 years ago, Jesus already in the Gospel of Matthew, he mentions something that is similar when he says, when he reminds us not to accumulate treasures on the earth where rust and worms corrupt them and where thieves unbury and steal them, but rather create treasures in heaven where neither rust or worms corrupt. For wherever your treasure is, there is your heart also. So Jesus, 2,000 years ago, introducing the concept that we should pay attention and see where our hearts are, and there, where our hearts are, our treasure is as well. And of course, for that, we need to detach from different material things, so we can see through it, so we can see clearly in terms of spiritual evolution. But then he also mentions in the Gospel of Luke a very interesting story, and it's a story of a rich man, and that also illustrates the concept of detachment. And this rich man had lands that had produced extraordinarily, and so he thought to himself, "What shall I do? Because I do not have place where I can put all that I have reaped. So here's what I'm going to do," and that most of us would do as well. "I would tear down my barns and build bigger ones, into which I can put my entire harvest and all my possessions." And talking to himself, he says, "And I will say to my soul, so I have many possessions saved for many, many years. That's it. Rest, eat, drink, and enjoy." But God had different plans for him, as Jesus tells the story. At the same time, God said to the man, "How foolish you are! Your soul shall be taken this very night, and then who will possess what you have accumulated?" And that's what happens to those who accumulate wealth for themselves but are not wealthy before God. So, in other words, Jesus was presenting a concept 2,000 years ago that today in modern psychoanalysis we would call impermanence and transience of earthly goods. So, meaning that we are, yes, for sure, the trustees and administrators, but not the owners of the wealth that God places in our hands. And this is very important to know, a strict accounting will be demanded regarding the good or bad use we have made of this wealth as a result of our free will. As we all know, the Spiritist philosophy believes in reincarnation and also believes in the law of cause and effect that in Eastern philosophies is called karma. So what happens is that according to the use we make of our free will, so we can have impact and consequences in future lives and future existences, for the good or for the bad. We've got this free will, so it's up to us to do the good use of it. The wealth itself, the riches itself, is not good or bad. It's just something, and then the use we're going to make out of it is the thing that will become to make it look a good thing or a bad thing. And I believe that's the moment to ask this question, because we would like to know. I believe that all of you that are listening to us right now, what does Spiritism think about all this? What is the Spiritist view on wealth? What is the Spiritist view on detachment, on attachment? Does it condemn wealth? Is it a bad thing? Is it a good thing? And what is the Spiritist view on detachment of riches, of material goods, or of earthly possessions? And this is the question that Kardec asked to the spirits that helped him during the writing of the principles that guide the spiritist philosophy. And the answer was really interesting, in the sense that the spirituality told him that if wealth were an insuperable obstacle to the spiritual evolution, as many people think, then God, who created wealth, would have put in the hands of some people an instrument of unavoidable perdition. A thought that is really repugnant to reason. It does not make any sense to think of something like this. It's more interesting, and as I mentioned to you, so Spiritism is a philosophy that believes in reincarnation, and we will all go through wealth and poverty in our incarnations. Because what? Because this is something necessary to our evolution as immortal spirits. And as part of the evolutionary process, we're gonna get learnings from both experiences. So having so saying that wealth or riches is bad, so we need to remember that it's the wealth that finances researches that help us to fight hunger, to fight poverty, to fight a lot of things, to fight disease that we see in the world. And so the thing is that, as I mentioned before, wealth as itself is not good or bad. It's the use that we make out of it. So uh, God and Spiritism hence do not condemn wealth, but rather the abuse and the attachment to it. So, wealth can be a pressure instrument of evolution or destruction, depending on what we do with it. And this is really important, that's where detachment, renunciation, and letting go step in. If we look into Kardec's teachings, we're going to see that Spiritism shows us that our excessive love for earthly possessions is really one of the biggest, largest obstacles to our moral and spiritual advancement. And why is that? Because when we are really attached to material or emotional possessions, we shatter completely our affective faculties, carrying them over to material things and paralyzing the impulses of the heart. So we literally freeze our evolution towards the light. And and this is really something that gives us a lot of perspective. Again, so we are talking about a philosophy that believes in reincarnation. And humans truly possess only what they can take with them from this world. I mean, nothing that is for the use of their body, but everything that is for the use of their soul. And we're talking about the intelligence, we're talking about knowledge, we're talking about moral qualities, we're talking about the good that we do, the good deeds, and that's really what we're going to take. That's really what we're going to carry to the other world, to the spiritual world. And that's where we should concentrate our evolution. That's where we should concentrate our thoughts and our feelings. So nothing material belongs to us, not even our physical body, which is stripped from us during our disembodiment, as well as all material goods. So, if we know that, if we have this conscience, we would be able to avoid a series of difficult situations we can find ourselves in, like the one I'm going to describe through this story. A story that you can find in the book called "In the Greater World," again written by Francisco Candido Xavier and dictated by the spirit of André Luis. So this part here, so it's an extract of a chapter 18th, during which André Luis, so he goes to the lower zones together with his instructor, Mr. Calderaro, and they go there for with study purposes. And here's what he tells us: at some point in time, they stopped in an enormous marshy plain where many groups of discarnated humans were lost in the distance, like thousands of madmen separated from each other, sometimes in bands. And they didn't go so far, and they stopped right next to an assembly of old men. And the scenes that are described later on are really impressive, and they tell a lot about attachment. So they all showed pitiful looking faces. They were all covered in rags, skeletal. Their hands were full of some sort of muddy substance, which they occasionally held against their chests, very anxious, very afflicted. And Andrelis didn't understand quite well that, but he kept on observing them in order to try to figure out what was happening right there. At the slightest breath of wind, they clung again to the fragments of muds, which they pressed again against their hearts, demonstrating an infinite fear of losing them. And nobody, and Andrelis could understand why, because all he saw was mud. And then those men whispered to each other, malicious, suspicious. Sometimes they would have the idea of running, but they rather stayed in the same place, like they were frozen between fear and suspicion. So they couldn't move. They were always in the same place with fear and suspicion. And then all of a sudden, one of them say something. Um, we can't stay here. What about our business? The wealth we have discovered is incalculable. And he pointed ostentatiously at the handfuls of muds that he had and that were flowing from his clenched hands. So actually, he was holding mud, but in his mind, all this gold we have with us remains at the mercy of thieves and this miserable Moor. It is essential that we find our way back. And in a minute, they were carrying mud. They were in the same place, and they thought that they had a lot of riches, a lot of wealth with them. And then Calderaro looked at Andrelis and said, they are loan sharks who disembodied many, many years ago. They descended so low to such a deep degree of attachment to transient material fortune that they are unable to access the inner sanctum of higher aspirations. Hence, their inability to find peace, to find serenity in the mental zone of worthy work. And that was not the worst. The worst was that they did not fully realize the methods they used in the past to achieve their selfish ends. They simply disregarded the rights of others and they mocked their own afflictions. And they set up real traps to bring down improvident companions in order to suck their savings, enriching themselves at the expenses of ingenuity and blind trust. And by doing that, they spread so much suffering around by their thoughtless actions that the mental matter of the victims and vicious emissions of revenge and curse imposed on them some sort of ethereal barrier in the realm of ideas. So they had some sort of barrier that was impeding them from seeing clearly and understanding the full consequences of their acts and fully understanding the situations they were in. Thus, stunned as they were, they fixed themselves in the crimes of the past. So their minds were there in the crimes of the past. These crimes were haunting them years and years for long, long years, transforming them into genuine ghosts of greed, tormented by the mirages of gold in this desert of suffering. Again, they seen what they saw in their minds. They had a lot of gold. They were lost, but had a lot of gold. But the real scene, they were lost, and they were holding a lot of mud in their hands. And the saddest part is that uh, they cannot predict, Colorado was not able to predict when they would wake up given the situation they find themselves in. They have gone mad in the passion to own, ending their sinister adventure as slaves of the mental monsters they created for themselves. And here's the link with the previous stories that we mentioned. So They created mental monsters, just like the same Andrea Lewis mentioned in the previous book, in the realms of mediumship, and just like the disciple from the Zen Buddhist tale, he created a mental monster as well, and he was enslaved to that. Just for the sake of explaining a little bit more what happened in this chapter, one of the old men that was there in that situation was Andrea Lewis's grandfather that disembodied many years ago, and he literally had his life. He lived his life just like Colorado described here in the book. But um, we spoke before about a Zen Buddhist tale. This lady here, so it's a Zen Buddhist monk called Monk Cohen. So she's a Brazilian lady, and why did I bring something like this here? So we are in the middle of a spiritist talk, and I'm bringing some Buddhism examples here, just to mention that the concept of detachment is being around for thousands of years, at least 4,000 of years. If we go back in time, 2,000 years before before Christ, we had already the Vedas writings that were explaining about the work towards the others, the works towards the good of mankind. So if we go back 2,500 years ago in time, so we can see what Buddha said about detachment. If we go 3,000 times, approximately 3,000 years approximately back in time, we can see Moses that had to detach from his culture, from his land, from everything else in order to found a new religion, in order to found a new nation. And if we keep on looking at history, we are going to see a lot of different examples speaking about detachment and letting go. And here it's no different. So when she speaks about detachment, she says detachment is when we have things and they go through us and we go through with them with a certain lightness. So it's something that is light, it's not heavy. If you have it, that's fine, it's okay. If I don't have it, that's fine too. I will not make a fuss out of it. We are entitled to have things, and this is important to know because sometimes some religions or philosophies say, no, you're not entitled to have anything. We are entitled to have things. It's just not to be imprisoned by material, by emotional or spiritual things. It's the concept of letting go, and this is a very nice concept that we have in the English, in the English culture, in the English language. In France, we would say lâcher prise, which is more or less the same thing. We just let things go, and we are not to attach it. And what she's saying here is exactly the same thing that Andrella is saying, that Jesus is saying, that Gandhi is saying, just to show how universal this concept about detachment is and how important it is. If we move forward, and I like this part very much because, again, that is the emotional, and that is the human, the philosophical dimension of attachment slash detachment. She says that attachment is also being attached to my ideas, to my status, to my titles, to my beliefs, to my concepts, in a way, in such a way, to my way of being, in such a way that I literally freeze myself, I limit myself, and I have no longer the ability to understand anything or anyone. I cannot move forward because I'm stuck in my own bubble, in my own concepts, in my own world. Detachment means being open to the reality in which we live. And in order to enter the final part of my talk and to wrap up, I believe that what everybody in the world has just lived for the past 2 years, um, it is it's a great opportunity for reflection that we have right now thanks to the pandemic. Of course, before anybody says that I'm completely a crazy man, we everybody is aware that the world went through a lot in the past 2 years. Many of us lost a lot of things: jobs, family, friends, and some of us even lost hope. But at the same time, we were granted a unique opportunity to learn and to separate what is essential from what is not, what is real from what is holding us back. And also, that's a magnificent opportunity to reinvigorate our minds with more spirituality. Uh, and the spiritist, meetings and discussions and so on, what is happening right now to the planet, we call it the planetary transition. And this planetary transition is really an invitation, an open invitation to reflect and to change our attitudes. Now, right now is the time to make the moral progress that mankind has not been able to make in 6,000 years of history. And this is a great opportunity. And this is a great moment. And this is history. And if you want to make part of it, what do we need? We're going to need a lot of detachment. We're going to need a lot of letting go. We're going to need a lot of forgiveness and self forgiveness, including. We're going to need a lot of love. We're going to need a lot of self love in order to move forward and to put all these virtues together as important pillars of our spiritual evolution. That's what all the moment we are living in this world is about. And I thank you for being here. May God bless us all. Just to finish with this is the last slide of my presentation. I brought here a few lines that were dictated by that you can find in the Gospel according to Spiritism, chapter 16, and that were written by the Spirit of Lacordaire. And he really gives a very interesting definition of detachment from earthly possessions by saying that they consist in appreciating wealth for its true worth, in knowing how to use it for others and not only for oneself, in not sacrificing one's interests in the future life on its behalf, and in losing it without complaining if it pleases God to take it away. And this is the true detachment. And let's bear in mind that above all, there are possessions infinitely more valuable than earthly ones. And this thought will help us detach from the latter. The less value one attributes to a thing, the less sensitive one becomes to its loss. And that's my talk. Glosio, over to you. I think it's the end of it. And thanks once again for the opportunity
Oh,
and for being here.
we are appreciative of you. We are appreciative of this very interesting talk. I really like the
Thanks.
Buddhist concept of letting things pass through you. Right? It's not about
Proof.
not having. Yeah,
No,
not
that's not about
having
not
things.
having. Hmm.
It's
Hmm.
to have them and know when to let go. I think it's awesome.
That's true. That's true.
We have so many questions here, and we're gonna
Oh, that's
start.
good. That's good. I hope
Yeah.
I'm gonna
So
be able to answer
I
that.
like this one. Yeah, check out this one here. It's from
Yeah.
Paul Jacoby. I
Hmm.
equate materiality with ego. So that's an interesting way to start.
Hmm.
Does
Hmm. Hmm.
detachment separate us from ego and let us love people for the good of others rather than for our selfish interests?
That's a very good one. That's a very good one. Yes, that's true. I think that we all have our egos, so that's part of our evolution. So what we have to bear in mind is that we are both light and shadows. So that's why, because as I mentioned to you, so we are spirits incarnating over and over again. So and as we move forward in our evolution, so our inner lights becoming more and more important. than our shadows. And we have to deal with our ego. That's part of us. And I think that um, welcoming him in the sense that, okay, I know that you're there. I have to deal with you. I have to learn from you. And we need to get along well. What I like to do sometimes, yeah, I like to talk to my ego and say, hey, hang on a minute. So I know that this is not good. Let's go. Let's try to do something different. Let's try to enlighten it a little bit more. And I believe that when we start doing that, when we start accepting this part of ourselves, I think that we are doing a very, very good progress. We are detaching ourselves from situations that we had in the past, and a very, very good way to detach ourselves is through self-forgiveness and forgiveness of others. Why? Because in order to forgive, you have to analyze, you have to feel, good in your heart, you have to feel fraternity, you have to give a lot of thoughts in different things. You have to analyze from different perspectives and so on. And the minute you start feeling love in your heart, then you understand the importance of detaching, the importance of uh, your ego decreasing in terms of of size. And when you do that, you are really detaching from all those things, and you are growing as an immortal spirit. Not sure if I answered it completely, but I try to to do my best. Sorry, I think I lost your sound, Lucian. I think you're in mute.
I
Oh,
was speaking on
yeah,
mute.
there we go. Yeah, there we
It's
go.
a very complex concept, the whole question of ego. But like
It
you
is
point out,
actually.
we
Yeah.
got to forgive ourselves and
Mhm.
accept. I mean, the thing is not to hide our ego, because then it becomes our shadow, right? It's to accept who we
That's the
are.
point. I like very much the concepts and saying that again. So we are in a moment of our evolutions that what we know for sure, we don't want to be like we were before. Um, we want to be that thing. We want to evolve in order to be that guy. We have model A, B, or C. We want to get there, but sometimes we don't know how to get there. And that's really, so we have a foot in the past, we have the eyes in the future, and a foot in the present moment. And how to reconcile all these things, sometimes a bit challenging, but that's part of our evolutionary process as well.
That's very neat. We have more questions.
Go ahead, please shoot.
Here's the next one. What is the best path to move from knowing the need to detach from material things to be able to put it into practice on our daily lives?
That's a very good I would start with with very simple things, I would say. So in a certain point in time, I mentioned the fact that during the pandemic, we had to give thoughts on what is essential and what's not essential. Okay, so maybe a good way to do it is when you're doing things. So well, hang on a minute. Do I need to do this? Is this essential? Is this bringing more good to me? Is this bringing more suffering and so on? And I think that and when we were speaking about detachment, so there's also the emotional parts as well. So we're talking about relationships. Sometimes we're talking about friendships, and that sometimes are complicated. Family that sometimes it's complicated, and I think that we need to look at and to take a step back and analyze the actions and saying, hey, okay, this is difficult to do. Okay, now it's a bit complicated. I'm not able to give such a big step, but I can do small actions on my daily lives, like, well, if I'm really attached to that this relationship that is really complicated and so on. Okay, let me breathe a little bit. Let take a step back. I will not give that much of importance to what person A, B, or C is saying, and I would try to be at ease with my heart, at ease with my conscience. So for me, it's really little things, little steps that we give in our that we do in our daily lives that really help us, to have a higher, a wider perspective, and then that will allow us in hopefully in a few years to say, look back, say, wow, I used to be like that, now look how I am right now, and I did it. But we need to be patient with ourselves, Gloria. What happens that sometimes, and I know I've been a spiritist for many, many years, just like you, and sometimes you say, "Oh no, I need to be like that guy, like Francis of Assisi, like Paul of Taurus, like Jesus." Hang on a minute. So we are in different evolutionary moments. Okay, we need to be humble to understand that. What can I do today for me? If what I can do today for me is really a small thing, okay, but I will do it constantly in order to prepare myself for the next step and the next level.
It is interesting. What sometimes we need to give ourselves some breathing room and understand, like you said, because eh, I've seen that in the spiritist movement
Mhm.
or any movement, right? We see this ideal, these spirits were so high, like of course
That's
Jesus
true.
and
Yeah, they're
Buddha,
so
and I say
perfect.
like Gandhi, and I say, oh my, I want to
Yeah,
be
yeah,
just like one of those. And it's like, well, take your baby steps. You're gonna get there eventually, but it's
that's the point.
one
That's
little
the point.
detachment at a time.
One little detachment at a time. That's good. And you know that Buddhism, it's what they're quite good at doing that because they really try to bring people to to that specific moment so they can pay attention to their actions and little by little start to detach from little things.
That's awesome. We have more questions.
Yeah, let's go. Let's go.
Okay.
Manuel
So
states.
yeah.
Mhm.
Oh, yeah, go ahead. That's fine.
No, go ahead. No, go ahead. Go ahead. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Emmanuel states in Consolador, question 55, the Consoler, that social inequality is the highest testimony to the truth of reincarnation.
Hmm.
Could
Hmm.
you comment on that on the context of detachment?
Yeah, yeah, and that's a quite good one. That's a really good one. Actually, if we have a look on the Gospel according to Spiritism, chapter 16 again. So there's one part there they're just speaking about inequality of riches, and what happens is that what means is that we are different spirits with different evolutionary histories. So some people are more evolved than others. Some people they had experiences that allowed them to evolve more into the moral side. Some people more into the material side, the financial, more mathematical thinking, and so on. Each one of us has a different story, is a different universe, a different world. It means that we have different abilities to deal with things. And hypothetically, and this is one of the questions that Kardec, he was a brilliant man, asked it to the spirits. He said, "What would happen if I just took all the wealth in the world and share in equal parts to everybody? So let's do that, and then give an equal piece of share for everybody." And then the answer of the spirits was, "Well, that would last for like 5 minutes." Because according to the different talents that people have, and this is also it's one of the parables of Jesus, the uh, the,
Talents, yeah.
the talents and so on. So according to the talents, they would evolve in completely different words, the different ways. Sorry, and this is also true for charity and for detachment, and this is also true for the selfless attitudes that we have. According to the way I feel my brother, I feel the world, I feel the spirituality inside. According to the way I did my progress in previous lives, to detach is going to be easier or not, or more complicated. And when we see the different profiles of people around the world, we can see it. It's very clear. And again, going back to one of the topics that I mentioned before, when there is wealth and poverty, and we need both experiences in order to evolve, because each one of them carries its teachings on its own. And we see it's unfortunate that but what we have to bear in mind is that inequality is really a characteristics of world of atonement, the world that we are living in. If we were living in more evolved planets and more evolved worlds, that would be a totally different story. So we would have detachment, yes, but we wouldn't have inequality. And unfortunately, the characteristics of this world are the reflex of the characteristics of the human beings living in it. So you and I, and everyone who is around us. And I believe that we still have a lot to learn. And what is going to happen is that this inequality is going to decrease, is going to diminish as we learn to be more detached from material possessions, and as we learn to put our brother's needs above our own self interests.
That's very interesting. Thank you for providing such a clarifying answer. Because we think about some systems, some economic systems that talk
Hmm.
about making everybody equal, and that's impossible. We are all different
That's impossible.
spirits.
You're
Yeah,
different. Yeah.
if you give each one of us $50, for instance, each one of us is going to apply
Hmm.
that money. I
Hmm.
myself, I
Yeah.
would buy books. Somebody else would invest in the market.
I would buy books too. Yeah.
So each one of us is different. So what it would be the meaning, how we would apply our talents, like in the
Sure.
story, is quite
Yeah.
quite interesting, and that makes us unique, and it's very special.
That's true. That's true.
More questions coming up.
Yeah. Let's go.
Exactly, what material things are we to detach from? Many material things we need, or is it the feelings we have for these things? That's interesting.
That's a very good question, Paul. No, actually, you said it very well. So, and I think that the example coming from the Zen Buddhist lady, so it's really strong. So, yeah, we need the material things, and again, so there's a chapter in the Gospel according to Spiritism, the 17th, speaking about the man in this world. So we need the material stuff to live. We need to eat. We need to dress. We need to we need to move. We need to live somewhere. We need a house, and we need to pay for schools and so on. So we need the material things. The thing that I think that the tricky part is not to get too attached in the sense that they become the only and most single important things in our lives. So as we saw, my last slide, there are things that are more important. So we got our families, we got our children, we got our parents, we got brothers and sisters and so on. We have our friends. Uh, I believe that n- when you put all your desire, all your efforts only on the material part, that is complicated. Because, and I'll give you an example. So we are so good in companies in planning, in doing the 5 years plan. So let's forecast the 5 year sales, the 10 years sales, where I want to be, and including us as people. So where I want to be in 5 years and 10 years time. We're so good at doing that. But what we forget is that we're temporarily incarnated in this world. I'm going to stay here 50, 70, 80, if we're lucky, 100 years, something like that. And then we go back to the spiritual world, which is our true world. And we spend so much time planning all the material stuff, and we forget to plan the spiritual one that we're going to need when we return back to the place where we came from. And it's all about finding balance. So the material things will come. Sometimes we will lose them. It's okay if we lose them. It maybe we're not going to be happy about that, but uh, let's always try to see what is behind that in terms of lesson. Let's see what is behind that in terms of learning, what we can learn from those experiences. It's as simple as that. It's hard to do it on a daily basis, but it's as a concept, it's really simple. I'm not saying, and spiritism is pretty clear about that. So we need the material stuff. So we are talking, we see what is going on right now. So how the pandemic, we put a lot of research in place in order to get the vaccines, in order to get the treatments and so on. We need the resources for that. Okay, we need the resources to to invest so people can have a place to work. We need all that, but the thing is not to get too attached to the point that you don't see anything else and you lose perspective from the real thing and the real life.
A very interesting point. There are some material necessities, but we need to know that we
Yeah,
will let go. And you had mentioned before relationships as well, right? Nobody
true.
belongs to anybody. All of us are individual spirits with our free will.
That's true.
So
Yeah,
we gotta also let go of our loved ones, because we all have our own individual journeys, even though
that's true.
we walk them together. Let's see what if you have any other questions.
Excellent.
Okay, another question. How to best detach ourselves from our old concepts and
Wow.
prejudices to embrace new ideas? Okay, now that's a lecture in
That's
itself.
that's a lecture in itself. Yeah, we can do maybe another one on that. Now, this is an excellent question. This is an excellent question because sometimes and that's a quite good question because exactly what we're living right now in the Spiritist Center. I work for, because what we are seeing is that a lot is evolving, a lot is changing, and what is really interesting is that, so let's go back to the basics. Let's go back to Kardec. Okay, so we're talking about 160, 170 years ago when the whole thing started. He wrote the books and so on. He wrote with the words of that period, with a proper style that was, the style of the period and so on. He was a very, very intelligent man. He was really brilliant and so on. Some things apply to that time, and ever since, things evolved. Some of them are really did not change, but the way we feel certain things evolve. You remember, in the past, we used to say that, at least when I used to when I used to be in Brazil, we said, no, spiritist people, they like to suffer because we have to suffer in order to go to heaven and so on. Wait, where does that come from? It comes from the Christianity. We saw Christ, he suffered a lot, he died, and then he went to heaven. And then we still bring that in our hearts from 2,000 years ago. We have to understand that. And we miss the point, which is loving each other, love your neighbor, love your brothers and sisters, and so on. And what I think is that we are evolving as a planet, as different nations, and so on. And we saw that this detachment concept has been around for 4,000 years. It's not something that belongs to spiritism, it belongs to mankind. And the concept of mankind and spiritism is not just planet Earth, it's the universe. It's a bit different. It's much wider than that. So what happens is that, um, how to embrace. I think that we should see the old concepts, see the old ideas, go there and say, "My God, sometimes we just look at that and see we do not that does not apply anymore." But in order for us to get to let go some old concepts, we need to feel them. One thing is when your mind is telling you, "This, I should let this go," but from here to here, it's a long way. And it takes sometimes decades, it takes centuries, different lives, and so on. So it's not an easy task, because what happens is that, for instance, I give an example of the mediumship. So what I've been seeing here in Belgium, so because all the spiritist centers, they were closed, they were shut down because of the pandemic and lockdowns and so on. Now we reopen the mediumistic groups and so on, and what we saw is that the mediumship is really exploding, explode in the sense that it is developing very, very, very fast, because there is a strong need from the spiritual world to communicate, to try to help a lot of discarnate people that really is in need of ourselves. And I can tell you, Glorious, that in our group, sometimes we are treating a lot of spirits that are completely lost, that are in huge suffering. They come, they come from every single country in the world. Sometimes they're Muslims, sometimes they're Jewish, sometimes they are Catholic people, sometimes they do not believe in God, but they are there, just brothers and sisters. And we need to have this perspective. So if we go back to what Kardec said, so you go there to chapter 17 again. So you see all the characteristics of the good spiritist, the good spiritist. You see love, you see justice, you see charity, you see fraternity, you see benevolence, you see everything. And these are qualities of the heart, and these are universal. And I think that if we want to detach, sometimes we have to widen our horizons and try to see through the human being that is right in front of us. That's a good way to start.
That is very interesting. Thank you so very much.
Thank you.
Interesting
Thank
for
you.
us to yeah accept different people, right, from different
True, true,
perspectives.
true, true.
I
It's quite interesting because, as I mentioned to you, so we saw what happened in the world, many disasters and so on. Some of the spirits that come to us, they don't even speak our language, either French, Portuguese, English, Spanish, whatever. So they just need to be there, welcome, and they are looking for relief. Period.
interesting.
And that's what we should do.
That's awesome. We have more questions.
Let's go. Let's
Let's
go.
yeah. Hold on a second. Just
Mhm.
I have my alarm here. Okay. Sorry about that. All right.
Wow, that's a good one. That's a good one.
Question. What can the story of Abraham and the request from God to sacrifice Isaac teach us about detachment? I think that is a very, I think that that story is perfect and is in line with what you taught us today.
That's a very strong story. So again, it tells a lot about detachment, because actually he was ready to sacrifice his own son on behalf of God, just to answer to God's request. But that happened like 3,000 years ago, 3.5 thousand years ago, something like that. So the concept of faith ever since evolved. Remember, so the concept of faith in the spiritist philosophy is really the one. So you can face reason, you can face intelligence at all times in history, and really it's what we call, it's the faith that knows, we know why we're believing. So we believe, but we study, we know, we understand. So it's something that comes with reason. It's not dogmatic. uh, there, what happened with Abraham, so that was really literal, that was really dogmatic, and he was ready to kill his son. And but if we step back and hang on a minute. So, what kind of God would ask a person to kill his own person? The same God that would tell Moses, "You shall not kill anybody." So, that's the point. So, we were dealing with a different, by then, we were dealing with different structure with a different mind structure. We're dealing with a different society, with a different knowledge in terms of love, in terms of caring, and so on. What I would say is that that wouldn't happen today, in the sense that we have evolved to a point that we know that God would never ask that to us. Hey, Gosha, could you go there and just kill your son, just to show that you believe me? No. So it means that we need also to consider things. We need to think. We need to see, to analyze, and that's what Kardec always said. So Kardec, he was really a researcher. So what he did was extraordinary, because he had absolutely no base, spiritist base, and then he had to create something out of nothing, out of scratch, and then he compiled the whole thing and said, okay, it makes sense, does not make sense, and he was always analyzing, just to be sure that he that made sense. And what to go back to your question, he tells that Abraham was really, in a way, a bit blind, because he was ready to do that, because that was the concept of faith then, and detachment and so on. But now it has evolved. It's different. Just asking people to let go, not to hate each other, instead to love each other, to do good, and not to do harm to other people. So that's my feel. But I don't know if you have any comments on that, because it's a very good question, to be honest.
I think it really applies to what you were talking about.
Hmm.
One detail you mentioned, the whole thing of it brings us to mind the whole concept of analyze everything.
Analyze. That's
So
true. Yeah.
and so it makes us think. I mean, what was actually the request from God? Right? Maybe
That's
the
true.
request is something different. Maybe the request from God was like, I know this is your only son, this is your legacy, but hey, you got to be
Yeah.
able to detach from it. So maybe Abraham God
Yeah.
said, okay, that's it. I gotta go there and do that. Yeah, but it's interesting the whole concept for us to think about things, especially about detachment, right?
Exactly.
Use our minds
Exactly.
to think,
Exactly.
not to
That's
get
true. That's
attached.
true.
We have one more
Mhm.
question for you.
Let's go. Let's go. Let's go.
Okay, from
That's exactly
Paul
what I was.
Jacoby again.
Go
Is
ahead. Go
exactly
ahead.
what I was thinking. The concept of detachment is perfect, but how to do it? It is little
Mm,
steps which has to start with recognition of the problem and the will to change. I really don't know the answer.
Yeah, that's really the challenge. So the answer, Paul, don't be sad about it, because what happens is that, not all of us have the answer either. So sometimes I what I do every day. So I wake up. Well, I do my prayers. I thank God, for just for being able to wake up, for my family, for my job, for my life, for the friends I have, and so on. And then as I move forward during the day, so what happens? So little actions. I go there, just go there, have breakfast with my wife and with my daughter, and so on. And something goes bad. And then I said, okay, hang on a minute. Then I stop. I analyze. I said, well, I said things I have shouldn't said. So I was really attached to details. So that detail, she said something that I didn't like. But why didn't I like? Was it what she said? Was it the way she said? Was it myself that was especially in a delicate moment, and so on? And I took it the wrong way. So what I do, especially what I do every day, I try to analyze what I'm doing, what my actions are. Sometimes I'll give a very good example. So this week I had a very busy week, because I had to. My work was asking me to do that. And when I was doing that, I was saying, "Oh, God, I should detach a little bit from that, because I need more time to do, to be with my family and do that and do that." And I think that's all about finding balance. Uh, uh, what I strongly believe is that when there is unbalance in your life, life will find a way to put you back on track by showing a lot of a lot of things that will bring you back to a situation to say, hang on a minute, this is the equilibrium point, this is the balance point. If I'm doing something that is harmful, that is compromising my health, something that is compromising my mental health, something that is like compromising my feelings, I need to detach from that. So we can see sometimes our body indicates that, but our mind as well. So I'm not sleeping, I'm not doing that. But why? Oh, ever since I started to do that in my work, ever since I started to do that, ever since I had this altercation with a friend, I cannot go analyze. We always need to analyze. The answer might be different to each one of us, but I believe that the start from the basics, start from analyzing your day, your reactions, and so on. Try to compare notes. There's a lot of things that we can learn from the spiritist philosophy. We can talk. No, talking to psychologists, that helps a lot, because sometimes they're really good professionals, and they know how to indicate, to how to do this, that, or that, and that's really helpful, because they're trained people and they know proper exercise that help. I can tell you one thing. So years ago, my wife was going through a very rough situation, and one of the things that really helped her was, the monk that I showed you, the lady monk Cohen, because she found in her a lot of tips, simple exercises, breathing. Just put your feet on the ground, one thing at a time, so she could bring her mind back to the present situation and get up on her feet again and move on. So we can have different solutions that apply different to each kind of person, because as Glosha mentioned, so we are a universe in ourselves, and we are different. But for sure, eventually, have a look on the spiritist teachings, compare notes, talk to people. Psychological support sometimes helps, because again, so it really helps. And observe your behaviors, observe your feelings, and try to analyze what is happening with you. What is not good, I have to detach from that. And sometimes you need some time to do that. Sometimes you need a plan. You cannot detach like this, but you can have a plan and do it in a wise way, in the right way.
Very interesting. You need to get a plan even for that, right?
You do, yeah, you do.
Yeah. Now, of course, coming from you as an engineer, I'm, that makes sense.
That
So,
makes sense. Yeah.
yeah, it'll make sense. So,
Great.
it'll be nice for you to make your final comments and, if possible, say the final prayer. Before that,
Yes.
I'll just like to announce that next week we're going to have another very interesting lecture. Check this out, Daniel. It's called Spiritist Philosophy and Science, and it's pretty much
Wow,
about
that's
yeah,
gonna
I
be a
know.
great one. That's gonna be
Yeah,
awesome.
it's like a segue, right? Almost like a
Yeah.
segue to what you're presenting. So it is kind of a path from the basics of philosophy all the way to the Spiritist doctrine and different methods that we have in philosophy, and also how those methods have and establishing parallels between those methods of philosophy and the work that Kardec did. So
That's
yeah, it's gonna be
brilliant. That's
presented.
brilliant.
Yeah, it's gonna be presented to us by Luis Vilasa.
Hmm.
So yeah, well, let's stay tuned for that one.
That's
Yeah, please
brilliant.
now. Yeah. So at this moment, could you please close and say any closing
Yeah.
remarks, and please say the final prayer for us.
Yes, 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 of course, of course. So, well, first of all, thanks for the States Spiritist Federation. A big warm thanks for Josara, who invited me, who let me speak today and be with you. I really enjoyed the theme. I really enjoy to exchange with you guys. So these are really good moments. We can think a lot about different things, and I feel very welcome when I'm with you, and this is really great. I really appreciate, and know that I learned a lot from the talkings and from the interaction with everybody. And let's bear in mind, let's try to detach. Let's try to let go. Let's try to forgive. Let's try to forget a few things. Let's try to love as much as possible. And this is a very good way, very good path towards a spiritual well-being. And having said that, I'm going to invite everybody to, if you feel comfortable with that, to close your eyes, take a deep breath, and relax. And I think the word right now is a big warm thank you for these moments that we spent together. A big thanks for all the support that we had from our friends and from the United States, but also from our friends in the spiritual world, our guides, our mentors, our dear friends that made this lecture possible. We learned a lot from each other, and it's really good and it's really rewarding to work hand in hand with all of you. May God bless all of us, and may we have a very nice weekend, and keep in our hearts these feelings of love and fraternity that we are feeling right now inside our souls. So be it. Thank you.
Thank you very much.